Hey everybody, welcome to episode 75 of the Askdap show, where we answer your Volkswagen and Audi questions. On this episode, we talk about Golf R oil coolers, brake pedals that are too soft, and alignments on Mark 7s.
Nate Hetrick via shopdap.com says, I have a 2013 Jetta 2.5 and I have a soft brake pedal. With the car off, the pedal is rock solid, but with the car on, the pedal is very soft. The brakes still function fine, but the pedal just doesn't have a solid feel. I'm looking for tips on what to check. Thanks, and appreciate your videos and website.
Okay, Nate, so what you're describing is actually a very normal brake function. What you're describing actually should happen for normal operation on every car. So basically what's happening is this. All current model cars generally are going to have a vacuum assist brake booster, which basically the engine, when it's at idle, has vacuum. It then uses that vacuum to give extra vacuum to the brake booster, which gives you the power braking. So when the engine is off, there's no vacuum, no power assist on the brakes, which is why when you're at a vehicle off, you'll actually be a really solid hard brake pedal. Once you start the engine, it should then be softer, easier to press because you have that power assist making it easier to press the brakes. One way just to verify this, a quick test, is if you have your engine idling, you pump the brakes a bunch of times, the pedal should get really hard to press because you use up all that engine vacuum that's in that brake booster, and the pedal should get hard. So the main thing you're looking for when it comes to brake pedal being soft is that if you stand on it hard, that it doesn't go all the way to the floor. And when I say all the way to the floor, I mean all the way, and it doesn't actually stop the car. So what feels to you like it actually is to the floor, if you actually were to have the pedal go to the floor, you would actually know, because the pedal would just go all the way to the floor and it wouldn't even stop at all. You wouldn't feel pressure. And that's really what you're looking for when you're looking for brake pedal issues. The soft pedal feel sounds like it's a power brake issue. If you have air in your brake lines, you will get a spongy pedal. That's tough to determine, I think, for the average person, because if you're not experienced with those specific cars, you may not be familiar with what that car should feel like in general. So comparing to another one is generally a good idea if you're thinking that you have a problem before you go chase your tail worrying about problems. But if you had a spongy brake pedal, you would want to bleed the brakes to get out any air in the system.
Derek Light via shopdap.com says, I was told that the only place that can correctly perform an alignment on a Mark 7 GTI is the dealership because of the use of a dealership computer tool. Is this true, or is the dealership just trying to make money?
Derek, so I am not aware of any specific dealer-only things that you would need to do for a Mark 7 alignment. It's a pretty basic suspension, very similar to every other Mark 5 or Mark 6 platform car. I'm not sure why they would say that. My guess is it's to try to get you to do an alignment with them, and they're not sure how to properly sell you on the value of their alignment versus another. Most dealerships are actually pretty competitively priced if they're smart. They do generally would have quality alignment racks, whereas most aftermarket shops, if they're willing to invest the money, keep in mind alignment racks are expensive. Not everybody maintains theirs properly, so that is a really important component. Alignment racks are, in the $50,000-$60,000 range, and then maintaining them is something they have to do regularly, including getting software for the most current versions of cars, which not all places do, so they just use settings from older models, which is something that I've seen people do in those circumstances. So all those are the main things you got to look out for alignments, but there isn't any special alignment tools. There was something on older model cars, Touaregs, and I think the B5 platform cars with the 4-link suspensions had something called raised toe, which was a completely separate adjustment that you would have to do. And pretty much anybody except for a dealer wouldn't know anything about doing a raised toe adjustment because it was complicated and a really big pain. And not Touareg alignments for that reason were much more expensive and not as easy to do, that most techs were not as familiar with the process for doing stuff on Touareg. So But on a Mark 7 GTI, there's not really a reason why you should be worrying too much about that. And I think most places you're going to go to are going to be perfectly fine to do an alignment on that car.
Pat Sweeney via Shopdap.com says, I have a 2015 Autobahn GTI with Performance Pack. It currently has over 37,000 miles on it as I drive it about 500 to 600 miles a week. The engine is serviced every 5,000 miles. I've been adding a half to 1.25 quarts of oil every 4 to 7 weeks since the first 5,000 mile service. Have you seen this with your Mark 7 or heard of this from other owners? The few times I've been to the dealer for various reasons, I have mentioned the responses that seems to be normal with the Mark 7. What have you seen?
Pat, so I've covered oil burning stuff in the past, and let's just go over real quick. Your issue you're having is you're consuming oil at a rate that seems like, based on your ranges, this is kind of hard to tell. So your ranges, let's go on the low side for both of them. So you're burning a half a quart every 4 weeks, but you're driving 500 to 600 miles a week. So on the low side, you're driving 2,000 miles for every half a quart. That is not even close to out of parameters for VW. I personally have not had any oil burning issue with my car over 30,000 miles and haven't had any issues like that. At this point, I have no idea what the expectation is for the average people. I haven't heard any commonplace of people burning oil, but what you're describing is not going to be outside of normality. If you were to have an oil consumption concern, what would happen is Volkswagen would go through and check, put a mark on your dipstick. They would top it off to a proper level, put a mark on your dipstick, record your mileage. They would then have you not check your oil, not open anything, come back in 1,000 miles, and they would check your oil level. And that's assuming that your oil light doesn't come on during that time. If your oil light comes on, you should never continue to drive the car with the oil light coming on without checking the oil and potentially adding it, or maybe just go directly to them, obviously. But again, oil light flashing, always never drive your car, and always add oil. At which point they would determine what your oil burn amount was during that time. If it does not exceed a quart every 1,000 miles, and I'm pretty sure that's still the spec, it always was previously, a quart every 1,000 miles, then it would not fall within what would be considered, fall within is an acceptable tolerance for oil burning. So a quart every 1,000 is actually a pretty significant amount, and most people, I think, would find that to be not an acceptable level, but that is what Volkswagen and Audi consider to be an acceptable level of oil, anything less than that amount. So your issue, I would say, is going to be normal operation for you, and there's not much you're going to be able to do to solve that specific problem. So just make sure you're using the right oil, and hopefully you don't continue to have any issue with that potentially getting worse.
Nick Wadlinger via ShopDap.com says, Hey guys, love the show. I noticed that the Golf R has auxiliary oil coolers where the fog lights on the GTI would be. The passenger side is for engine oil and the driver side one is for the DSG if equipped, I think. I have a DSG GTI and I'm interested in adding any OEM parts that could improve engine safety and reliability. These two auxiliary coolers in particular. I plan to go IS38 or big turbo down the road and want to have as much reliability as possible. Placement would be a challenge, but I'd like to avoid aftermarket kits that require expensive oil pumps.
All right, Nick. So you want to add an oil cooler to your Mark 7 GTI, and you're looking at what you saw on the Golf R. So the Golf R actually doesn't have that. What you're looking at is not an oil cooler. That's an additional radiator. So that just hooks up to the cooling system and is an additional radiator in the system. The oil cooler on the Mark 7 is actually going to be in the front of the block area, kind of on the passenger side, right below where the oil filter is. So I'll show you a picture here where it shows you here's where the oil filter assembly is. And then if you take a look here, this is the oil cooler thing. It's usually like a big rectangular looking box thing that has some coolant hoses that run into it. That's what most oil coolers look like, with the exception of external ones, which is what you see that additional radiator for. I don't know why they would use that as an additional radiator and not use it as an oil cooler. generally that would be the case, but from everything I've seen, there are no oil lines running to that in any way. That's just a radiator. And it does, I believe the auxiliary water pump is in line with that, so I'm not sure if that's why it's there, because it gets more ambient air than the one that's sandwiched between the intercooler, or what the purpose of that was. But that's not going to net you what you're looking for in that. I would say eventually what's going to happen is someone will design an oil filter that actually probably replaces where the factory mounting one does and runs the lines out for an external one like what you're looking for. But most likely it's not going to be a cheap proposition one way or the other, just because oil coolers, making that happen is going to be pretty expensive as far as the pieces to make it, and the market for it's not super huge. So good luck, and hopefully you can get your oil cooler set up. And obviously oil coolers are great for cooling down oil temps if you're running at races or high temp oils that were going to be engine running high RPM for a long period of time. Then an oil cooler is a great plan to protect your engine. Thanks so much for watching episode 75 of the Askdap Show, where we answer your Volkswagen Audi questions. If you have any questions or comments about the questions answered in this show, be sure to leave in the comments below. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more like it.